So we're all in agreement, right, that this movie was completely doomed from the get-go. I mean, the fact the original is a cult classic, then you have the tragedy surrounding Brandon Lee at the time it came out. Feels like a remake really nobody wanted, nobody asked for, but it still begs the same question as always. Is it a worthy remake? Just to be transparent, guys, I saw the original Crow about 10 to 15 years ago, and I really don't remember it at all. So this entire review, for the most part, basically going to be from the perspective of somebody who has no strong affiliation to the original. I'm just going to be reviewing this remake. I really have no connections. I don't remember what happened. So know that everything I say going forward is specifically related to this remake, no ties to the original. I'm confident to say that how much joy you get out of this remake of The Crow is probably going to depend on a few things. The first thing being how strong your affiliation is to that original. I know it's in the hearts of so many people, it's a classic. I don't have that connection, but I will say this movie is completely different from the original. If you're somebody who wants that movie to be remade exactly, you think that movie's untouchable, you're probably not going to enjoy this movie, I'll tell you that right now. The second thing being how much you buy the romance in this film. Again, you have new actors, new characters, Eric and Shelley obviously, but how much you buy these leads' performances, how much you believe this romance is going to matter a lot. I keep hearing this movie has no soul, it fell flat. I feel like how much you enjoy this film is going to completely depend on the romance. You buy these two as a couple, do you think they do well? If you do, might enjoy the film. If not, again, probably not for you. The last thing being the action in the third act. I think a lot of whether or not you like this film is going to hinge on if you think the payoff's worth it, the action revenge in the third act of this. If you're somebody who thinks it's done really well, because I think it's pretty wild, you're probably going to like this film. But if you don't think the payoff's worth it, you don't like the third act, you're probably going to hate this film. So those are all my disclosures before I get into it. Let's talk about it. So a very quick and loose synopsis of The Crow. Basically, you have this couple, Eric and Shelley. They're both pretty broken characters. They meet each other, fall in love, having a romance. Shelley is killed, him soon after, but because he is so torn up, this is such a tragic event to him, he basically can't pass over into the afterlife. He's gifted a second chance to get retribution in the form of the Crow. He can come back, kill the people who wronged him, and save her soul. That's a very Cliff Notes version of it, I guess. Now, starting off with what I actually really liked about this film, because I do think there's a good bit you can enjoy with this. I think Bill Skarsgård is really good in this. And just as a preface, I'm pretty biased towards the guy. He's probably my favorite working actor in Hollywood right now. I don't really think there's a project he's done I don't like. But yeah, I think he's really good in this. I think he makes the role his own for what he's asked to do. Kind of a shame though, because I already know there's going to be so many people who go into this and they're going to just write him off and dismiss this movie because he's not Brandon Lee. They're going to compare them. But just individually, I think he's fine in this role. I think he does well. I enjoyed his performance. One of the big things when this movie got teased and leaked and they were showing pictures of him with his tattoos, a lot of people did not like the look of this. And I know like a lot of things in this review, probably I'm going to be in the minority. I really liked his look. I liked the tattoos, and I also liked when he gets into the full outfit, the jacket, the makeup, the blood. I think it blended seamlessly. I really enjoyed his look. Right up my alley aesthetic wise, very gothic. I thought they nailed it. So again, I like that. I actually like his makeup better than the original. Don't burn me at the stake. But I liked what they asked him to do. I thought he was good in this. I thought his character looked really good. And this is very important, as I said earlier, because the way this is framed, there's a huge romantic overtone, and he's good in this. He's charismatic enough, I believe, he can carry the first act of this film. If it was another actor, I think this movie would have suffered a lot more. But because he demands such attention, he's such a good actor, he's so believable, he's so charismatic, I think he carries the first act, and he gets you segued over into the point this movie starts talking about his story, it gets into the afterlife themes. So yeah, I think he's really good in this for what he's asked to do. I think he basically carries this film, especially getting to the action. So I was a big fan of Bill Skarsgård. The guy can't miss. The other character you have to talk about in this when it comes to getting over that romantic hurdle, whether or not it's believable, is the girl who plays Shelley. I thought that actress was good as well. I've never heard of her before, but I thought she's fine for what she's asked to do. Again, I believe these characters for the most part. Thought they were charismatic enough. I thought they shared enough in common. So I like that. Some people won't buy into this, but you kind of have to buy into that love flick element to get into the revenge flick it turns into. If the romance doesn't work, I understand why you check out. You think it's flat, it's soulless, but for me it worked. So I'll give it a pass. I thought it was enough to get to the action. The other thing I really liked in this that stood out to me is the way this movie looks. I think it just looks beautiful. It's a very crisp picture. The cinematography is obviously very skilled, very gothic aesthetic. It's rainy. I just really liked the world this took place in. I was really into it. I thought it was a cool picture. And then on top of the way it looks, I really liked the way this movie sounded as well. I thought the soundtrack was really cool. The music choices, very somber at times. It's a mix of pianos, violins, makes things feel a lot more intense than they are. Feels like the stakes are heightened, the emotion. I was a big fan of it all, as well as the sound design in this. I thought the sound design top notch. When you're fighting, the crunching of bones, gunshots, I thought it all stood out. So the way it's produced and just made as a movie, I think it's a very competently made movie. And one other minor detail that really stood out to me that I actually really enjoyed them highlighting a lot. It's when he becomes the Crow, gains his supernatural powers. They keep highlighting the fact that even though he's basically an immortal being at this point, he can still feel pain. And I really like that choice. I don't know if that's something they explored in the original or not, but in this movie, they keep highlighting that. No matter what he does, if he gets shot, he gets stabbed, he can regenerate, but he also feels the pain of it. I feel like that's an added layer of empathy for the character that he has to push through this pain for the love he's after. I just really like that. Again, maybe it's cliche, maybe it's corny. I like that attention to detail, so it really worked for me. But this movie is definitely not without faults. In fact, I think it has some major issues. The first one being pacing. Now, as I said, Bill Skarsgård's good enough he can kind of bridge this, but the movie really is broken into 3 acts. The first act is just a romance, getting to know these two. The second act is getting to know the incentives of these characters, knowing more characters, world building, getting to know the afterlife. Then the third act is just going to be full-on revenge flick. That's how this movie's structured. And I think the first act works if you buy it, which I did. Second act gets really confusing when it just keeps bouncing around between 5 to 6 characters. It's just a very convoluted story, how they're exploring it. Third act, I think, is great, so I'll get into that. But if you don't get into the pacing of this film, you don't buy into the romance, I can really feel like this movie is going to be a slog for you and you're just going to check out and think this is very generic, has no soul. Again, wasn't my experience, but I totally understand why people have that, because if I didn't have such an affiliation for Bill Skarsgård, I don't know if I would have bridged that gap and made it to the end. The other major negative to this, and I can see it being a huge problem to some people, it's actually the villain. And I wasn't completely on board or understanding what he was doing and who he was. So I think the villain in this could have used a lot more clarification. He's not really a memorable villain. It's kind of weird the way they explore it. So again, I can totally see why that rubs people the wrong way. They kind of feel like this whole thing is for naught. For me, I overlooked it because I enjoyed other elements. But yeah, I totally see why people go, yeah, that is just not good. Getting back to something I mentioned earlier, one of the hurdles you have to get over to enjoy this movie is whether or not you like the third act. I'm somebody who that third act worked great for. I think it was badass. It's one of my favorite third acts of a movie this entire year. Because when you get to the point in the film where it's action and revenge and you're following him around, he's covered in blood, his makeup's dripping, he's badass looking. I thought there's 2 or 3 kills in that third act that are some of the best kills we've gotten on screen this entire year. I thought the gore was great. I thought it was intense. I thought it was creative. I really liked this third act. So I'm somebody that ending really worked for. The very last scene in this, I feel like I can go either way on. It feels like it's trying to set up a sequel, a little bit disjointed, a little bit confusing. Wasn't the worst for me though. I accept it for what it is. So overall, guys, I know I'm going to be in the minority on this again probably, but I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I had a good time with it. I thought it was well acted. I thought the romance was believable enough. The picture looks really good, sounds good. It's definitely not without faults, a little bit confusing. The villain has some problems, but not as bad as people are saying. I think you could definitely do worse. So have any of you guys seen the remake of The Crow yet? Do you have any intentions of seeing it? Do you think the original's good enough? It's untouchable. Let me know in the comments down below. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I do it all on this channel, but that's all I got in this video. Peace!